it really is saying my goal is to help empower and drive everyone else within the organization, and that my role is to be that beacon, to be that light for them by focusing on everyone else's development and empowering them and helping them grow. Man, you build something sustainable that may or may not necessarily need you at times.
Michael, would you do us the honor of just giving us a little bit of your background, introducing yourself, and letting our audience know who you are?
Sure. Yeah. Again, thanks for the opportunity. I've had quite a leadership journey, and so my role, what I get to do right now, is consult with businesses, specifically with their cultures, to help them maximize the talent that they have, and then really help them attract amazing new talent. And that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges that we have today is not only keeping people excited and productive, but also really attracting new great people in this war for talent. And so my story starts with me sorting dirty laundry when I was going through college. I worked for a uniform laundry company and just learned, the ethic of hard work, which actually, was taught to me by my dad. He was in general contracting. And so I'd pick up nails, I'd walk around and help out any way I could with dad, lift heavy things and did that basically from the age of 7 on. And so I really attribute any success that I have to my parents' work ethic and then my faith. Those two things have carried me through so much. But when I was in college, I went through and wanted to be in business management, but I really didn't know how to do that. I didn't know what that could look like. And so I jumped into learning all the textbook answers and learning different things. And as you grow as a leader, once you start managing others and you start doing a business or anything you start doing, there's the textbook answers and then there's the real world answers. And I, to be completely honest with you, really struggled in how I led. I kind of thought I had it all together and I kind of thought I had all the answers. And I learned really quickly through a lot of different examples that I didn't. Who at 21, 22 doesn't have the whole world figured out. And so I actually hit a pretty big crisis point because I had decided that I wanted to step out on my own in doing commission-only insurance sales, and decided to sort of step away from the leadership aspect. And I just crashed and burned because I didn't really know who I was or what I was doing. And it was in that really low moment that I walked into a Starbucks and asked the manager at the time, Rick Cartwright, who I will always remember is one of my most amazing mentors, said, "Hey, could I show you a different way? And could I show you kind of how to lead?" And so through 4 years at Starbucks, and then transitioning into working at one of the largest credit unions in the country, I learned a different way. I learned how to lead, and I learned how to really try to lead with my heart. And I'm so thankful for all the mentors along the way, because I again probably made every single mistake you can as a leader and as someone who manages others. But along the way, you learned a lot of really important lessons. And so those are the lessons, through failure and through success, how to help lead leaders effectively. And so that's the work that I get to do today.
That is awesome. That is awesome. I think this is going to be a great episode for our audience. A lot of them are business owners. They're starting companies. They're getting to that place where it's like, okay, do I hire somebody, et cetera, et cetera. And, of course, we've got everything that's going on with the great resignation and quiet quitting and everything else. So this is going to be a great episode. Thank you again for joining us. One of the things that stuck out to me with what you said was you didn't know who you were. And what do you mean by that? And why is that significant or important?
Well, honestly, Rick, to me, it's the most important question that we can answer. Not only just, extensionally, why do we exist, right? But with leaders, I think a lot of times for ourselves, and especially as we're leading our teams, we don't ask that type of question enough. Why am I here? Why do I exist? What sort of mission do I have? What's the bigger picture? What's the purpose? Because I don't know about you guys, but I don't get super excited about spreadsheets. And I don't get super excited about numbers. The numbers typically, hopefully, tell a story. right? The numbers mean that I've helped support someone or that we've served in some way. And unfortunately, we get so wrapped up in all the figures and the numbers and all the things, right? And we lose what kind of got us started to begin with. And so when I was starting out, that was one of the traps I fell into, was
Mm-hmm.
focusing too much not on the people that I was either, leading or serving,
Mm-hmm.
but focused on what the output was. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's a really important question to ask is, who am I really? What are the areas that I'm really strong in? I believe a lot in strengths-based management and teaching, but also importantly, how do I want to express this, right? How do I want this to flow from me naturally? Because if I'm forcing things, or if I'm in the wrong place, or really have the wrong motivation around how I'm leading other people or
Mm-hmm.
how I'm doing business, it always shows up, right? I could list like tons, not only myself as an example, but we see it in the news every day. People put the wrong emphasis on how they lead. They don't really know who they are. Maybe they start compromising their morals or their integrity or their beliefs, and then the wheels always pop off, right? So I really focus on leadership integrity, knowing who you are, and really drilling that down specifically, even writing it out, so that that's the thing that you always go back to, right? That's the thing that you hold on to, especially when times can be tough. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, great question.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Good stuff. Good stuff. Another thing you mentioned was mentors. You mentioned you had a number of mentors along the way. Talk to me about the value of that. Well, two things. Talk to me about the value of that, and then the other piece to that is how you found them, or how they found, or how those relationships, I should say, came about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think especially in leadership, business ownership, it can feel really lonely. If I'm just being really
Oh
honest, and
yes.
as I work with leaders, a lot of times that's probably one of the biggest things that's expressed. And so having mentors in your corner, whether they kind of see you floundering, thank goodness, like I mentioned with Rick, he saw me kind of doggy paddling, trying to keep my head above water there and kind of in a crisis point, or they're ones that you seek out. We always want to pursue the things that sort of attract us, right, in someone else,
Mm-hmm.
and in their success or in their character, typically.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just what I've done. Once I hit that rock bottom, I was like, I'm going to spend thousands of dollars and thousands of hours pursuing wisdom from people who've already done it in front of me, right? They've crashed and burned. They've learned the
Mm-hmm.
lessons. I don't want to have to keep learning that way. Let me learn from their successes, and let me learn from what they have to offer me. And then just being really open. I think the biggest value for mentors is for us to be saying, instead of me holding the tight fist, the clenched fist of, I know what it's going to take, or I'm just going to do it on my own, or those types of ideas, this open
Mm-hmm.
hand to receive always, always, always gives us way more than what we can even expect, right, or imagine.
Yeah.
And so that to me has been so helpful with the mentors that I still receive coaching and mentorship, because I believe, even though I'm coaching others and help
Yeah.
others, that there's no way I can grow and scale up without receiving that, so I can give. And so yeah, that's been really powerful for me as I've walked through just my own journey.
You said you were committed to spending thousands on mentors, and of course, every coach out there is going to say, hey, what, you're going to get your money back, multiples, yada, yada, yada. I mean, without necessarily going into how much you've spent, I mean, do you really feel like you've gotten a return on all of the time and money and effort you put into, your coaches and mentors?
Oh yeah, and I'm not saying that from a place of, hey, I coach and mentor, right? I'm in consulting, so I'm not sitting here saying, oh yeah, you gotta, I spend a bunch of money, you gotta spend a bunch of money. There's two important elements, right? What's the value I'm receiving from someone for the transformation? Because it's not just
Right.
about the textbook answers, or even a lot of times the program. It's, what is the transformation that I see on the other side? And when I ask myself that question, the
Mm-hmm.
money and the time spent is more than worth it, because it always translates into more than just one area, right? I may have started off trying to receive some coaching around addressing an issue with work, but how does that show
Yeah.
up with my family, right? How does that show up in my relationships with other people? What does it
Yeah.
open me up to in other areas? And so, yeah, I would definitely say the coaching and the mentorship and just really the help that I've received has been
Hmm.
so worth it. And, because
Mhm.
money's just one piece of it, right? It's also my time and the
Hmm.
attention that I bring to it and the
Hmm.
transformation that I allow through it.
Hmm.
Sometimes I see that folks throw a lot of money at a lot of different things, and there's two issues: is either their level of commitment towards actually having transformation towards something, um,
Mhm.
or they're maybe just not ready yet for that level. They're pursuing something that they need to go back to that first question we were talking about. Hey, why are you really here? Why are
Hmm.
you pursuing what you're pursuing? And let's get down a little bit deeper first so that you can start pursuing some of these other things once it aligns with like your mission and your values, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. It does. Sorry, Hazel, I cut you off. I know you had a brilliant question. I apologize. I'm sure it had something to do with spreadsheets because I know you love them. No, I'm just kidding.
Let's keep that between us, Rick. Come on. I was just going to say that I love your backstory, and as far as the mentorship part, I think the people, the entrepreneurs, business leaders who pursue mentorships are really brave, and what makes them a good businessman because um, getting someone to evaluate what you do and tell you what you're doing wrong can be a hard pill to swallow. So
Hmm.
I really admire business leaders who are actively uh, pursuing mentorships and taking steps to improve themselves, their organization, and also their team members. So I really love that. One thing that you mentioned is how you crash and burn before having that wake up call and sort of like make that initial step to transformation. So I think that kind of alludes to this concept called self sabotage, and having self sabotaging patterns that can ultimately break your career trajectory. So my question is, how do you read early signs that um, you're starting to fall in that downward stream, and how do you like pursue a different path in a positive flow?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because there's always signs, right? It's always kind of like, well, a lot of times for entrepreneurs and leaders, it's kind of like the race car track, right? And for
Mm-hmm,
some, they're just like, man, I'm just going to go ahead and put my foot down, to pedal to the metal, and never stop, right? I'm never going to change
mm-hmm,
the tires. I'm never going to pit. I'm never going to like get, I'm never gonna put gas in the tank. I'm just going to keep going. And typically, the signs that you start seeing are always relationships first, right?
mm-hmm,
Hmm.
Typically, what you'll start seeing with anybody, and this was my story, is relationships at home or the people that you're closest with will start suffering first. If
Hmm.
it's related to something in business, and then you'll start seeing it trickle into the closest people in your business, right? Those that you're closest with, relationship wise, and then ultimately like to your clients and your customers, not the other way around. And sometimes, when I'm pulled into helping businesses, I have one business right now where it's a mom and dad who are looking to hand over their business to their son. And the three of them, thank goodness they're working on this, but they weren't on the same page, right? There's just a lot of inner conflict going on because they're a family run business. And, they needed to learn how to relate in just a whole different way and not have all the conflict, or when frustration showed up, how to actually deal with that. But I would say the big one that I typically see is how people treat the people that are closest to them first, because having burnout or having stress or
mm-hmm,
having some of these other symptoms that come up typically are going to show up with the people who are around us the most, and
mm-hmm.
typically they're going to show up in the people that we're trying to impress the least, as bad as that sounds, right? Because they just know us, they kind of know us warts
Yeah.
and all, and so they just experience us. So I'd say that's probably one of the biggest ones. And then I would just say secondly, you can just see the lights kind of dim a little bit, right?
Mm,
There's not the fire and the passion that there was before in
mm,
regards to just life in general. It could be about the business, it could be about, forward plans and stuff. And so if it's for you personally as a leader, or if you're working with others and you kind of see that light dim a little bit, and it's just palpable, right? You can
mhm.
walk
Yeah.
into a business and see someone and you're kind of like, well, they're there, but they're not really there, right? And that's
Mhm.
different than a bad day. It's a way of being. And once you start seeing that way of being, things have to start getting addressed, because that's one of the check engine lights, right? That's one of the things saying, hey, you've been going too far, too long, right? Let's slow down, let's pit in, let's figure out what's actually going on, so we can, drill a little bit deeper and then help uncover that issue to help people, kind of reignite that fire, what got them started in the first place. So.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Wow. Um, I think there's a little guilty smile here. um,
I'm guilty too, man. I totally, I'm preaching to myself here. So.
Yeah, I'm sure many of our listeners would appreciate that, because I would presume that they would better catch these early signs before letting that self-sabotage patterns consume them, and, crash and burn, as you mentioned earlier, hit a rock bottom before going way up.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I would certainly agree with what you're saying, Hazel. It's like with everything going on these days, it's been, the job market's been absolutely horrible. Inflation, I mean, just so much rapid change, going on. I mean, what are you seeing in leaders? What are you hearing? What are you observing?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of burnout. And I think, unfortunately, because of the shrink in the labor pool and the labor market, I mean, there's a war for talent now that we've never seen. And not to be a big downer or a bummer, but because
Mm-hmm.
of, kind of the lack of growth in population and a lot of shifts with technology, I don't see that changing anytime soon. If anything, I think it'll
Mm-hmm.
probably be a little bit worse for a time. And so what that means is, for leaders, what's really common is to, hey, I'm going to pull myself up by the bootstraps. I'll just jump in and do more tasks. I'll just do more, right? Which perpetuates that cycle
Mm-hmm.
of, now I was kind of a little bit burnt out. Now I'm a lot more burnt out. And
Mm-hmm.
what kind of was hey, how long is this pandemic thing going to kind of go? Now we're in the cycle of, just overworking. I think is a pretty common trend that I see and hear for business owners and leaders. And so I think one of the biggest ways to help really attack that is, how do I delegate the authority that I'm used to holding on to? And that's a pretty big one, and that's harder. Is obviously, you if you don't have enough people to do the jobs, then it does make it a challenge, right? But one of the big things I typically see is that leaders do hold on to too many things a lot of times, in fear of, well, if I don't, this thing won't get done, or gosh, if I don't
Mm-hmm.
let, if I let go of this, I'm just going to, lose this person in 3 months. So why not, it doesn't make any sense for me to really invest in them and empower them and help them, help my company grow. Right. Because there's just sort of this fear of, how long will I keep this person? And also maybe there could be some hearing going on, right? Where the leader, even though it's not necessarily their task or their thing, they just find a lot of intrinsic value in it, even though it's holding them back from empowering the very person that they want to develop. And so
Yeah.
sometimes that happens as well, as a trend that I see um, with leaders, is giving things over, not just to take things off their plate, but to
Mm-hmm.
actually help that person, because it's part of their development and growth. And it's also giving them more authority within the organization.
Mm-hmm. So you're raising up essentially raising up the leaders around you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Got it.
believe
Got it.
firmly that everybody's a leader. I say that
Yeah.
every single time, right? I'll ask a room of literally managers and leaders and business owners, and I'll inevitably, any speaking engagement I do, I'll say, hey, how many of you in this room would consider yourself a leader? And I'll
Mm-hmm.
normally get maybe 40% of the hands raised up. right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll say, well, hold on a second. How many of you influence people within your organization? People look to you, maybe as a peer or a mentor. How many people here are parents? How many people, have younger siblings, right? I just kind of listen, and then everybody's, and now who's a leader? And everybody's like, okay, yeah, like sometimes we don't fully take on that
Mm-hmm.
persona and really the role of we do have influence. And so I firmly believe whether people have a manager or a leader or C-suite or anything in their title, everybody's a
Mm-hmm.
leader. It's just a matter of how much have you been given in part if you're working for an organization, and also how much authority have you decided to step into, right, and claim
Mm-hmm.
and grow into. And so that mindset really helps a lot so that leaders don't feel like they are on an island, they're all alone, and they have to shoulder the burdens of the world. Once that dynamic shifts, it really pulls everybody in and helps everybody see, hey, we are all pulling together and can shift some things as well.
Does that ever come across in almost almost like diluting the definition of leader? So, and I say that to say, we look at certain people that have stepped into leadership roles and did very well, and not to suggest that we shouldn't have personal leadership at all, but I wonder if that role or that title of leadership is not. I don't know. I wonder if by saying like everyone's a leader, if it takes power away from the people that really put the effort and the time and the drive and take responsibility for leadership of people, significant people, if you will.
Yeah, no, and that's a great comment and point. And I don't want to sit here and minimize anybody's role, right? I mean, if you're a CEO, if you own your own business, if you're leading other people, for sure. I mean, that's a big piece. And the people that I see that are successful long term in those roles
Mm-hmm.
understand that they're, number one, a servant first. Number two, that they have given authority to people in key roles within the organization that they trust, who are capable and committed. And just know that it's bigger than them, and that
Yep.
they are focused on empowering people to take over their jobs, right? They're hiring people who are smarter than them, and not to minimize themselves, and not to say that they're not worthy of leading, but to your point, Rick, it really is saying my goal is to help empower and drive everyone else within the organization, and that my role is to be that beacon, to be that light for them. And when leaders have the time and the capacity to do that, because
Mm-hmm.
they've spent so much effort in developing their people to help, in my opinion, see themselves as leaders and as a really important critical role. Some of the most influential people in businesses do not have any sort of title. And I'm sure you guys could see that too. I would even say family members. You know what I mean? Like my mom, I totally influences our family, right? And kind of the whole structure of it. And moms are a lot that way. A lot of times, grandmother. Like so many strong men and women who may or may not have this C-suite title, have so much influence. And so to your point, I think it's really important for people as leaders to know, hey, you definitely have a voice and you have a responsibility, and what you do is important. And by focusing on everyone else's development and empowering them and helping them grow, man, you build something sustainable that may or may not necessarily need you at times, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the goal, right? Is kind of replicate
Mm-hmm.
the best parts of ourselves, work out the crappy stuff in ourselves, and hope that kind of can be minimized so that we can help move our businesses and what we're trying to do forward. So
I see this as pretty tricky to navigate nowadays because
mm-hmm.
once upon a time, and before I dive into this, I just want to say that social media can influence a lot of the employee mental state, and so I would say once upon a time there was this term called the hustle culture, and everyone around us is like dedicated to giving their best in the organization, stepping their foot forward, making their work their life, basically, And now tides have turned, and what I've been hearing nowadays is that what was once a popular concept called hustle culture has become quiet quitting. And to those listeners who don't know, quiet quitting is a newly coined term where workers are basically just doing the bare minimum to keep themselves from getting fired, and refusing to go above and beyond from what is expected of them. So I'm curious to know about your take on this. So where do you draw a line? And as far as as quiet quitting, since this is a very trendy term right nowadays, I want to ask if this is a cause for concern.
Mm. Yeah, it's definitely a big check engine light. And just like you mentioned, it's interesting, we tend to go in cycles, or I would even say, swinging of the pendulum, right? So to your point, there was this hustle and grind culture, just push really hard to get to the top, or, have 5 different side businesses, right? Just try to basically just working yourself to death.
Yeah.
It was kind of popularized for quite some time. And then you've seen a more recent shift, especially with millennials and younger, who have said, hey, wait a second, I've kind of
Mm-hmm.
seen how this plays out with my parents. I've kind of seen how this has played out with other people. I don't want any part of that. I'm swinging the whole other way. And what's true with any of these pushes or I don't call them kind of fads, or at least things that are popular at the moment, is it always creates an opportunity for leaders when we view it that way. Say, wait a second, we're in too far extremes in both of those examples.
Yeah.
So what could actually be healthy from it? And I did a TV interview recently, and we talked about some of the ways to address quiet quitting. And the biggest one is seeing that it's just a symptom of something
Mm-hmm.
deeper. And typically that is, I do not feel valued in my work, or I feel like the work that I'm doing doesn't line up with my pay, my time, with something, right? It's a reaction to say, because I don't think anybody down, who really values hard work really wants to say, cool, I'm just going to skate by, right?
Yeah.
Cool, I'm just going to just do the bare minimum. It's a reaction to something deeper. And when we dive deeper, and when I work with businesses, I start asking some of those questions. And what's interesting is, even though people are participating in quiet quitting, it's more of a reaction than it
Mm-hmm.
is like this really deep desire. A lot of people don't really want to go down that road. They just kind of feel desperate. They don't know what else to do. And so we get to sit down with the leaders, and one of my big recommendations is having leaders be really proactive with quiet quitting. Even, maybe some of it's already started within a business. How can you
Mm-hmm.
use this topic and say, man, can you believe what's going on? I'm seeing this and hearing about this. And then engage in conversation really directly with your people. Hey, do you feel some of these ways? Do you feel a little bit
Mm-hmm.
burnt out? Do you feel like you're working more than what kind of is allotted for your time and your efforts? Like do you feel like it aligns up? Or even sometimes just the physical work of what people do can be shifted, right? Hey, I really love this portion of my job, but I feel like it's like 10% of what I do. If there's any way I could do
Mm-hmm.
more of that, like that just fills up my bucket, right? Like that just gets me going all
Yeah.
day and all week. A lot of times it's just changing the priorities and shifting some of the duties that folks get to do, or developing them for something else if they don't feel like there's a pathway out, instead of saying, well, I'm basically just going to opt out. Right. I'm only going to do the
Mm-hmm.
minimum. I'm just going to do whatever it takes so you don't fire me, type of
Yeah.
thing. Because I just don't think we're built that way as humans. I don't think that's part of our nature. Our nature is to go above and beyond when we have a choice, number one, and when we have a desire to do
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
so, right? If you give me a choice, I got a leader, and I've had leaders like this, I would run through brick walls for them. I will stay late. I will do whatever I need to do, right? Because I'm working for them, and I know how much they
Mm-hmm.
care about me. And so then I'm going to offer up that out of my own choice. That's different than, now I'm stuck doing 2, 3 people's jobs, feeling burnt out, decide, hey, I'm just gonna skate by because you guys have kind of, abused this relationship. So all that to say, I think there's definitely a lot of opportunity in quiet quitting, depending on how leaders address it. And having really open, honest conversations and finding new ways to sort of structure positions and expectations is a great way to start.
Wow, it's great.
Yeah.
So it kind of looks like we've got this snowball that's forming, big scary snowball, that's forming. So we've got, all we've talked about with the pressures that are on leadership. And you talked about how, as leaders, we tend to start to almost isolate ourselves. Like, okay, I got to do this now. I got to do that now. I got to do this now. I got to do that now. And, in the same breath, we're pulling away from, our team and maybe our family, et cetera, et cetera. And you have the team starting to pull back saying, oh, I'm not appreciated. It's a snowball that's happening. I mean, how do you break that? How do you break that pattern? How do you make sure you're not, destroying your business, and your family and yourself?
Yeah, I know it feels really daunting, and it, honestly, with the environment, it can feel kind of overwhelming. And again, this is the work I love to do. I view it as one of the best opportunities that we have right now. It almost feels like all the pieces that we had before were sort of stripped away, and now the truth of kind of where leaders are at and teams are at, and where we're at in business have just exploded. And with transparency, there's definitely fear and there's definitely anxiety around what's going to come next, but also creates an opportunity for me as a leader to say, okay, well, what is healthy for me when it comes to work, right? What do I actually want to pursue when it comes to not only my time and my attention, but in how I want to lead? And then having the dialogue with your team specifically to, number one, I think it's so important to know what they really think. All of us, typically a lot of us, I shouldn't say all of us, a lot of us struggle with being really brutally honest with, our leaders or with those that we're working with, right? Because we don't want to hurt feelings. People have like good intentions, and I've had great bosses who I knew cared about me, but some of the things that they did, I didn't necessarily love. So how do you communicate that? Well, one of the ways that I do, one of the tools that I employ is a culture survey, because you can measure culture and you can actually provide that. I'm actually going to provide that as a free resource to your listeners, just a little quiz to give a little snapshot and say, hey, how are things going here? What are we really great at? Because I always love focusing on that. Whatever you're great at, amplify it, right? Like turn it up, focus on that intently. And then what are some of the areas that people aren't in love with? What are some of the struggles? What are some of the things they may not feel valued in? And then how can we address that and attack that? But, by going a little bit deeper and asking those questions, you get to the ground truth. And then I think there's a powerful way for leaders to come in. I call it relational leadership, to be 100% honest if there's areas that we failed at, which again, my story is I failed at a lot. Most everything I'm talking about, I failed at some point, is coming in with a humbleness to say, hey, I messed up in this area, or hey, we could have done this differently. You would be surprised how forgiving team members and employees are when a leader humbly comes in and says, guys, man, either they didn't know any better or they just, said, hey, I got to do this differently. Would you guys let me try something different, right? Could we do this a different way? You guys be willing to do this with me? And it's incredible to see the transformation because, again, people want to see other people be successful. They want their best. They want good things for their leaders. And sometimes, so, it really gets down to knowing the ground truth, expressing what those things are, having leaders build a plan, apologize if they need to. Apologies that are heartfelt are powerful with leaders. And we see so many examples of people apologizing. I'm doing air quotes right now, right? Apologizing for things, but it's not a real apology and it doesn't really fit. That apology and that humbleness allows for a new dynamic to happen, for new expectations to be set, for a new thing to happen. And so many times people, when I work with businesses, they're like, thank goodness that we were able to have a real conversation about this because we've just been dancing around it for the past couple of years, whatever the thing might be. And then leaders need to be held accountable and their teams to move forward in the things that they know they want to do. Right? Because anybody can say anything, right? And everybody can be all excited about the next program or the next breakthrough. And don't get me wrong, those things are important. But if you don't have accountability for everyone in the organization to where you want to move forward, it's only going to last for so long, right? So those are the three big elements: getting to the ground truth, resetting those expectations and working through any issues, and then really having some solid accountability in place can really change an organization, can change cultures, and make just a huge difference.
So how about when you hire new people? how important is it to determine whether or not they would fit in a company culture? Assuming that that person meets all of your qualifications skill wise, how necessary is it to actually implement a culture fit interview? And
Yeah.
yeah, I just lost my chain of thought. How necessary is it to implement that culture fit interview? Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's critical. It's one of the biggest elements that I see that is missing a lot of times, and leaders, I've been guilty of this. Kind of have our own bias sometimes of, hey, I like that person's personality, right? So they're going to be
Mm-hmm.
great for the team, and sometimes that's true. Or people really focus on the experience that someone has that they could bring to the organization, or oh, they know these systems. I've heard that many times, and
Yeah.
typically all those things really don't matter when it comes down to it. Are the people that you're hiring capable and committed? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have those two attributes? And does the team think that they could be a great player that fits the organization? The good ones, right? The ones where
Mm-hmm.
you're like, oh my gosh, this person's a superstar. Man,
Yeah.
if I could like replicate you, and make 10 of you guys, like I would do that, right? Who are your amazing people? Who are the influencers on your team? And then how can you pull them in? I've had many times with organizations where the manager would see someone, maybe they would come in, they'd sit down with them, they would do the interview, and that person had made some sort of comment to one of the coworkers, and all the coworkers were like, "Yeah, I hope he doesn't hire him," right? Because they just knew something was off, the fit wasn't there, right?
Mhm.
Maybe they made some snarky comment, or just like, "Oh
Mm-hmm.
no," and so leveraging that piece of not necessarily groupthink, but like you said, culture fit.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to help us be even better, right? Who emulates like the characteristics and the qualities that are part of our team that will help us grow,
Mm-hmm.
and pulling people in even just for a portion of the interview. Because my
Yeah.
story is most of the time we know someone as far as that fit piece or just kind of that connection piece
Mm-hmm.
within the first 30 seconds to a minute. A lot of times now, you granted you want to have a longer interview with folks, but if you know someone's off culturally and there's just a big bent
Yeah.
out of someone not living up to maybe values, or you just kind of have that off feeling, a lot of times that
Mm-hmm.
can be can just be felt, and
Mm-hmm.
that's because they display some things that either are great or aren't
Yeah.
great, and it doesn't matter obviously like any of their attributes, you know what I mean, as a person, because everybody has different personalities and backgrounds and all those different things. It comes down to what does the team think, and then how can you pull them in? So they might shadow as in part of the interview. They might just get to meet that person for a little bit. They might have a shadowing time, for the job. They might just, be able to bring them in and do, a lunch together or a Zoom call
Mm-hmm.
together, just something so that people can experience that person and
Yeah.
say, oh my gosh, it really feels like they embody our values, and
Mm-hmm.
and help confirm what a leader's looking for, or say, hey, here's some red flags. You might want to ask
Mm-hmm.
some additional questions, maybe do a second
Mhm.
interview, and be able to go from there.
Awesome. Awesome. Great question, Hazel. Great question. Great question. Michael, one last question. We're running out of time. You've spoken a number of times about some of the, let's call them pitfalls, that you've had over the years. What do you feel like your favorite one, or the most challenging one you had to deal with was?
Gosh, it's funny. I have a little PDF that talks about the 7 traps that leaders fall into and how to get out of them. Which, if folks look me up online, or Facebook or whatever, you'll be able to find it there as well. And that, feel free to jump in and take a look at that. But the one that really hits home for me was not what I call honoring the present. We're so
Mm-hmm.
distracted, right, as humans, and it's really easy for me to be, having a one-on-one or trying to have a conversation with someone, or know that I really need to be intently focused on them and be like, okay, yeah, right, yeah, like that whole deal, right? Where it's like, oh, I think I'm really great at listening right now, and I'm not.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you guys know this and have experienced this when someone's super keyed into you and they've removed the distractions and they're truly listening and they ask some deeper questions. It feels so good, and that fills up that value bucket because it's so uncommon. And so one of the things I really, try to emulate for myself, but really, hit home with leaders is remove all the distractions, right? Remove your cell phone, put things on, just move anything that you can away. Take notes if you can, but just be as intently focused on the person in front of you and treat them like they're the only person who's there. And that was something I really struggled with. I was trying to message people. I was thinking about 14 other things. And the feedback I got was like, Michael, we know that, you like us, but we just don't really feel like you care about us because you're always doing all these other things. Right. So once that hit home for me, I was like, oh my goodness, if there's one thing that people can do, especially as leaders and owners, and we know that, man, if I can just be intensely focused on the person in front of me, ask them great questions. There's a quote that I love that's, the quality of your life is dependent on the quality of the questions you ask. Right. So if I can ask amazing questions that show people that I care about them and that I want to discover more, and if I can be really intent, whether that's 5 minutes or an hour, right? If I can be locked in, man, that changes so much in relationships and removes a lot of the mistrust that can be in place when someone feels like you're sort of half paying attention, or that you're just really not you're just not into them, right? You're not really, you don't really necessarily care about them, which may not be your intention, but that's what they experience. And so that's definitely a big one. I think probably the hardest one too, for a lot of us right now in this digital age. But gosh, so powerful, so powerful. A lot can be fixed just from removing yourself from that one trap.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. My goodness. I've gotten busted. I'll be talking to my wife. She's like, yes, honey. It doesn't always work out. That doesn't always work out. And I'm sure we could go down a huge rabbit trail, communication and everything else, that's tied to that. But, thank you so much for being on the show. Really enjoyed it. Learned a lot, I had to take that walk of shame, apologize and stuff. My team is absolutely fantastic. And I have to say publicly, they absolutely are. We've worked very, very hard this year, and they've really pitched in and dug in and, done great things, done absolutely fantastic things. And I'm really excited to work with them. So anyhow, just a shout out to them. Shout out to you, Hayes. and without taking anything away from you. So you're going to give us some links and stuff to put in the show notes in case anyone wants to reach out to you. And you had the one resource you mentioned. Anything else we should?
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say anything else you want to share with our audience before we take off?
Yeah, no, you can find me on all the socials. I'm on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and all that. And I'd love to share that free resource, the culture survey and quiz. But you touched on something, Rick, and I just want to encourage us. We're all striving for excellence, right? We all want to be at the top of our game. And so as I'm talking about any of those things, I always say, gosh, if there's an area for us to focus on and reflect on, just like I have through my own leadership journey, nothing's meant to be put down or anything that way. It's only an opportunity for us to grow. And it's only an opportunity for us to say, how can I amplify the best parts of myself? And then if there's a change that needs to happen, how do I address that quickly? And for the benefit of myself and for those around me, so that I can really help them be their best. And so that's what I love to do with leaders, and love being able to go through some of these things with you guys as well. I definitely appreciate that.
Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, there's nothing better than to be able to just see these things. It's just like, oh wow, I could be better. It's a journey. It's a journey. I love the way you said that. Well. Again, thank you again for being on the show. Folks, don't forget, we're going to drop another episode in about 2 weeks. Please keep up with us. Make sure you subscribe, hit the bell. You get a notification next time we drop one. And take care now. Thanks for watching another episode of Epiphany Off the Cuff. Please make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when the next episode is going to drop. Don't forget, we're on podcasts as well, so you can catch us on your favorite podcasting platforms. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Epiphany Off the Cuff.